Imagine sitting down for dinner in the Ice Age. Instead of a neatly cooked steak or fresh vegetables, your plate might hold raw marrow scooped straight from bones, roasted insects, or even half-rotten meat scavenged from predators' leftovers. What cavemen ate to survive would shock, and even horrify, most of us today. But their strange, sometimes gruesome meals weren't just about filling their stomachs. They were the secret to human survival. Picture the Ice Age landscape, a world of frozen plains, icy winds, and predators lurking at every turn. Food wasn't something cavemen could count on 3 times a day. There were no stocked pantries, no markets, no certainty that tomorrow's meal would even exist. Every bite was a battle, a gamble of time, energy, and survival. For most of human prehistory, hunger wasn't a rare inconvenience, it was a constant companion. Cavemen could go days without finding enough to eat. And when hunger gnawed at their bellies, they had no room to be picky. Fresh, spoiled, raw, or crawling with bugs, it didn't matter. If it provided calories, it was eaten. That's because starvation was always closer than comfort. Archaeologists tell us that many of the earliest meals weren't hunted at all, they were scavenged. Imagine a group of humans following a saber-toothed cat from a distance, waiting until it abandoned the carcass of a mammoth. By the time cavemen rushed in, the best meat was gone. What remained? Half-rotten scraps of flesh, tendons, and bones cracked open to slurp the rich, greasy marrow inside. To us, it sounds revolting. To them, it was a feast. Welcome to Before Flame. Fire if you enjoyed traveling back in time with me. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next journey into our ancient past. Now I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? It'll make me so happy to see our community connecting from all around the world. And most importantly, if this video make you just imagine or actually feel what it was like to live as a caveman or cavewoman. Share your thoughts below, I'm excited to read them all. This brutal reality meant that food was never guaranteed and never wasted. Cavemen ate what they had to, not what they wanted. Their diet was shaped not by taste or choice, but by the merciless rules of survival. When a kill was made or a carcass found, cavemen treated it like treasure. To them, an animal wasn't just meat, it was life, energy, survival. Nothing was wasted, not even the parts that would make most of us gag today. Organs like the liver, heart, and kidneys were prized above all else. Why? Because they were loaded with nutrients that pure muscle meat didn't provide. The liver, for example, is rich in vitamin A and iron, a life-saving shot of nutrition during times of scarcity. Some tribes even believed eating these parts gave them the strength or spirit of the animal. Fat was equally important, often more valued than lean meat itself. In a world where calories meant survival, fat was energy condensed. Cavemen cracked open bones to get marrow, a greasy, nutrient-packed substance that kept them alive during long winters. Skulls were split open to scoop out the brain, used for both food and even tanning hides. But it didn't stop there. Stomachs and intestines were cleaned, then eaten or used as containers for storing water or cooking broth. Cartilage, tendons, and skin were chewed, boiled, or roasted to extract every possible calorie. Even burnt scraps from the fire pit weren't discarded. To us, it may sound horrifying, eating brains, gnawing on tendons, drinking blood, or slurping marrow. But for cavemen, these weren't gross parts. They were survival foods, rich in nutrients, and often the difference between life and death. In the Ice Age world, picky eating simply didn't exist. Hunger erased disgust, and necessity turned every part of an animal into a lifeline. When hunting failed or herds migrated, cavemen had to look elsewhere for survival. And what they turned to would horrify most modern eaters. Insects were a staple. Grubs, beetles, and crickets were easy to find, packed with protein, and required no weapons to catch. Anthropologists have found evidence of early humans cracking open rotting logs or digging in the soil for fat, squirming larvae. These bugs provided quick nutrition in desperate times, and yes, they were eaten raw or roasted over a fire. Roots, tubers, and wild plants were another fallback. But without farming, cavemen had to experiment constantly, tasting, testing, and sometimes poisoning themselves to figure out which plants were safe. Bitter roots, fibrous leaves, and hard-to-chew bark often became meals when nothing better was available. Survival meant eating what nature offered, even if it tasted awful. Bones of ancient sites also suggest that cavemen consumed eggs whenever they could raid nests, from birds, reptiles, even giant Ice Age creatures. A nest full of eggs was like striking gold, easy to gather, quick to cook, and full of fat and protein. Even carrion, the rotting remains left behind by predators, wasn't always off the menu. Archaeologists believe early humans sometimes scavenged kills from lions or wolves, scraping off whatever meat was left. Dangerous? Absolutely. But in a world of hunger, risk was part of the bargain. To us, this menu sounds shocking: bugs, bitter roots, half-rotten scraps. But for cavemen, it was survival. They didn't have the luxury of choice. Every calorie was a battle, and eating disgusting food meant seeing another sunrise. Imagine the Ice Age tundra, wind howling, snow crunching underfoot, and a herd of mammoths lumbering in the distance. For cavemen, this was both opportunity and danger. Hunting wasn't about trophies or sport, it was survival, and every successful hunt meant food, warmth, and life for the tribe. But the chase was never easy. Cavemen didn't have bows, guns, or advanced traps. Instead, they relied on sharpened wooden spears hardened in fire, stone-tipped weapons, and teamwork. A hunt meant strategy. Some members drove animals into swamps or ravines, while others waited in ambush. Failure wasn't just disappointing, it could mean weeks of hunger. And the risks were enormous. A mammoth could crush a hunter with a single strike. Even smaller animals, like wild boar, could gore or trample. Hunting was brutal, messy, and often deadly, but the payoff was worth it. Meat, fat, bones, and hides became the lifeblood of survival. Still, cavemen didn't always bring down giants. They often went after smaller, more manageable prey: deer, horses, or even hares. These hunts required patience and persistence, tracking animals for hours, sometimes days, until they could finally strike. Every piece of the animal was precious. Meat was roasted over open fires, bones were cracked for marrow, hides turned into clothing and shelter. Nothing went to waste, because nothing could be wasted. For cavemen, hunting wasn't just about filling stomachs, it was about feeding families, strengthening bonds, and ensuring the tribe's survival. It was one of the most dangerous, yet essential parts of daily life. Not every meal came from a triumphant hunt. In fact, much of prehistoric survival was about knowing when not to fight, and instead, when to take advantage of nature's leftovers. Cavemen were opportunists. If a pride of cave lions or a pack of dire wolves brought down a bison, humans often waited nearby, hiding in the brush, until the predators ate their fill and moved on. Once the danger passed, or sometimes even before, scavengers crept in, hacking off chunks of meat with sharp flint knives. It was a risky gamble. One wrong move, and the original killers might circle back, forcing humans into a deadly confrontation. Sometimes, scavenging was even more dangerous than hunting. Imagine crouching at the edge of a kill site, the stench of blood thick in the air, bones cracking as hyenas feast, while you clutch your stone blade, praying for just a few scraps before being noticed. That was the reality of prehistoric dining. And humans didn't always wait politely. Desperation sometimes pushed them into active theft, waving torches, shouting, and even throwing stones to scare predators off their kill. Fire became not just a tool of warmth, but a weapon of intimidation, a way to claim meat that wasn't theirs to begin with. Scavenged meals were rarely clean. Meat was half-rotten, bloody, or crawling with insects. Bones cracked open for marrow were often gnawed down by wolves before humans got to them. Yet, in an Ice Age world where hunger never stopped knocking, even the scraps of another predator's feast could mean survival. If there's one thing that truly set early humans apart from many predators, it wasn't just hunting skill, it was the way they shared. Food wasn't an individual prize, it was a lifeline for the whole group. A successful hunt meant the hunter didn't eat alone. The entire tribe gathered around the fire, carving portions of meat, dividing marrow-filled bones, and roasting scraps together. This wasn't just generosity, it was survival strategy. In harsh climates, no one could afford to face famine alone. Sharing food created bonds stronger than blood. It meant trust, cooperation, and reciprocity. If you gave meat today, you could rely on someone else to share tomorrow. This social glue is what allowed humans to thrive where other predators struggled. Meals also carried ritual weight. Around the fire, stories were told, lessons were passed down, and strategies for the next hunt were whispered. Even scraps of fat, liver, or roasted roots became more than food, they became symbols of unity. Anthropologists argue that communal eating was one of the foundations of human culture itself. And there was hierarchy. The choicest cuts, liver, brain, fat, often went to the most skilled hunters or respected elders. Others got the leaner scraps. Sometimes disputes arose, and in moments of scarcity, those at the bottom of the hierarchy might go hungry. Yet, even within this structure, the act of dividing and sharing remained crucial. In a world where predators tore each other apart over a carcass, humans carved out a different path, one where survival wasn't just about the strongest, but about the group standing together. If you were invited to dinner by a caveman, you'd probably struggle to keep your stomach steady. Forget about grilled steaks or hearty bread. Prehistoric meals often included things we consider disgusting today. Insects, for example, were a vital protein source. Grasshoppers, crickets, beetle larvae, all packed with fat and nutrients. For our ancestors, they weren't creepy crawlies to be avoided. They were crunchy, life-saving snacks. Scientists even believe roasted locusts were common during seasonal swarms, offering a feast when larger prey was scarce. Bones weren't discarded after the meat was gone either. Cavemen knew marrow was a nutrient goldmine, rich, fatty, and essential for survival in freezing climates. They cracked femurs and skulls with stone tools, slurping out the marrow and even roasting it for flavor. It may sound barbaric, but marrow could mean the difference between life and death in lean times. And then there's the unthinkable, scavenged remains. If another predator killed a mammoth or bison, early humans often arrived late to the scene, driving scavengers away to scrape every last edible piece from carcasses. This included organs, fat deposits, and sometimes even rotting flesh. By modern standards, revolting. But to them, it was practicality. Wasting food wasn't an option when survival hung by a thread. For us, this diet sounds horrifying. For them, it was ingenious. Every scrap, from a beetle wing to bone marrow, was fuel for endurance in a brutal world. If bugs and marrow weren't enough to turn your stomach, cavemen also relied on foods that would make most of us gag today. One of the strangest: fermented meat. Imagine an animal killed too large to finish in one sitting: a mammoth, a bison, or even a horse. Refrigeration didn't exist, so what did they do? They buried chunks of meat in the ground or left them in icy pits, letting time and natural bacteria preserve it. The result was tough, sour, sometimes rancid meat that kept them alive weeks after the hunt. Scientists believe this practice was a survival hack in cold regions, where spoilage was slowed but never truly stopped. In many ways, it was the earliest form of food preservation. Then there's blood. Far from waste, it was a rich source of iron and calories. Early humans drank animal blood fresh, used it in soups, or mixed it with fat to make a crude version of blood pudding. For them, it wasn't strange, it was a vital supplement. Today, some cultures still honor this tradition, but to modern diners, it often feels unsettling. Plants weren't always safe, either. Cavemen often experimented with bitter roots, tough grasses, and even mildly toxic plants. They learned through trial and error, sometimes deadly, which could be eaten in small amounts or detoxified by boiling, soaking, or roasting. Acorns, for example, were toxic raw but became edible once leached of their bitter tannins. To cavemen, these foods weren't exotic delicacies, they were survival strategies. To us, though, the idea of sipping warm blood or chewing on half-rotten meat feels almost unthinkable. If you thought bugs, blood, or fermented meat were shocking, brace yourself, because cavemen took the philosophy of waste not, want not to extremes. One prized delicacy was animal brains. Rich in fat and nutrients, the brain was often eaten raw or lightly roasted. It provided essential fatty acids that were otherwise hard to come by in the Ice Age. Archaeologists have even found evidence of skulls deliberately cracked open at dig sites, proof that early humans valued what was inside just as much as the meat outside. To modern sensibilities, eating brains might sound grotesque, but for cavemen, it was life-giving fuel. Another surprising food source: the stomach contents of prey animals. Hunters sometimes ate the partially digested plants found in the bellies of herbivores like mammoths, bison, or reindeer. Why? Because it offered pre-digested nutrients, fiber, and even beneficial bacteria. Think of it as an early, very raw form of probiotics. Disgusting to us, yes, but incredibly practical for them. Finally, almost nothing from a kill went to waste. Fat, marrow, tendons, skin, and even bones were used. Bones could be cracked for broth, hides turned into storage containers, and dried tendons chewed for extra protein. For cavemen, food wasn't just about taste, it was survival. Every bite mattered. To us, the caveman diet might sound horrifying: brains, blood, bugs, and rotten meat. But for them, it was a world where hunger loomed every day, and creativity with food meant the difference between life and death. What we see as shocking, they saw as normal, even sacred. So, what cavemen ate would absolutely horrify most of us today, from brains and blood to bugs, fermented meat, and even the stomach contents of animals. But here's the thing, to them, none of it was strange. It was survival. Every bite carried the weight of life or death, and nothing was wasted. What seemed shocking to us was simply smart, practical, and necessary for them to endure the brutal world of the Ice Age. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Humans have always been adaptable eaters, willing to turn whatever the land, or a fresh kill, provided into a meal. It wasn't about taste, it was about survival. If you found yourself cringing but fascinated, ask yourself this: could you eat like a caveman if you had to?